this wash plant. It's got a lot more sluice run width, and so that's what should increase our yardage and help us get through all of the pay here at Dominion in the money pit that we have to do. It's a bit of a gamble going with something that's untested late in the season, but...
Parker Schnabel has some shocking news that will blow your mind. He narrowly avoided bankruptcy in the span of a single day. Was it luck, or was it a mastermind strategy that he has used to turn the tables around?
Like, we've paid royalties on the pits, we have to get the pits done.
We're gonna need something with a big blade and a bunch of horsepower to move all that material.
Buckle up, because you're about to be astounded by this unbelievable turn of events as we reveal the specifics of Parker's extraordinary journey. Following Parker Schnabel at his lowest point in the most recent Gold Rush installment, we see him continuing forward with the same old red truck and exhausted crew, but now he's got new costly challenges to deal with. All season long, Parker has been dealing with financial issues, and he and his teammates have been living in constant fear of bankruptcy and ruin.
I wonder if at the end of the season we'll be like, oh, we should have not done that.
Going home empty-handed isn't the only thing at stake here. Everything boils down to him falling short of what his staff and enthusiastic fans at home had hoped for. Over the course of the season, Parker's objectives have begun to change from recovering the $15 million he invested in the claim and maybe collecting up to 80,000 ounces of gold to just breaking even and recovering all of the money that was squandered in this extensive operation. What began as a heroic and audacious mission to acquire numerous claims rich in gold has devolved into a nightmare for any gold miner worth their salt. The closure of his sole gold-producing wash plant has rendered even that modest aim meaningless, leaving him with no succor. Time is money in this industry, and Parker is losing more and more of it every second. However, in the 8th episode of Season 14, titled Last Ditch Gold, his luck is said to improve. Gold Rush's Parker Schnabel is desperate for a new job just 2 months into Season 14. Despite bringing in almost $800,000 worth of gold, he has only brought in 400 ounces. While it may appear remarkable to produce nearly $1 million worth of gold in just 2 months to the average person, this quantity pales in comparison to the estimated 80,000 ounces of gold, or $160 million, that Parker staked his claim on finding in Dominion Creek.
How's our 24-hour test look?
Use 2 hands, don't break it, because the jar is probably worth more than the gold that's in it.
Indeed, he understood this lavish undertaking would be a risky gamble from the start. Thus, the word bet is appropriate. Considering that Dominion Creek is supposedly a long stretch of undeveloped land, one can understand Parker's disappointment in finding only 400 ounces. The claim's undeveloped nature makes it an ideal spot for a daring gold miner hoping to strike it rich. Parker initially saw the additional 40 feet of excavating required to access this concealed treasure as a small annoyance. But what started off as a small annoyance has now become a major concern for him and the whole squad. Parker slams his walkie-talkie into the passenger seat and yells an irate curse word upon learning that his sole gold-producing operation is shut down. His face fades out of view as we see him sprint to the shoulder of the road, his hand firmly grasping the wheel of the vehicle. In his haste to reach the pit, Parker eventually gets a glimpse of the gold-producing facility. Maybe the camera is trying to catch the movement of the speedometer dial, or it's just giving him a moment to collect himself after hearing this terrible news.
So, the pit Tyson's in right now should have lasted 2 to 3 weeks. Or was it a week?
Whatever the purpose of the cutaway may be, it abruptly removes Parker's mustard yellow t-shirt, a color that is strikingly similar to the ounces of gold he obsesses over, from the frame. The golden nugget that he is now losing control over. Over the weekend, Tyson communicated via walkie-talkie that he was closing down the factory because to the rapid extraction of the unforgiven cut, Tyson, as a seasoned miner, would know how to determine if a piece of land had been mined to its maximum potential. This is devastating news. But in response to Tyson's discouraging remark, Parker just said that he would have Chris clean up the area. Parker is a responsible person who refuses to put himself through unnecessary hardship when problems emerge. Those under his supervision about the anxiety or stress he experiences at work. Similarly, Tyson isn't afraid to make tough calls, like shutting down the wash plant, even though he knows it will cost them money in the long term. No fruit has come from their investment. Given the amount of time and money that has already been committed, it is prudent to cease pouring more into a sinkhole. The gambler's fallacy, often called the Monte Carlo fallacy, is the mistaken assumption that the frequency with which a random event has occurred indicates a lower probability that it will occur again. For instance, Tyson would have wasted a great deal of time and money.
What's happening?
How's your levels?
Oh, not too bad.
Betting on an unproven outcome if he had kept running the wash plant because he was confident that the next run would produce more gold than prior returns. According to Parker, the cut should have provided them with 2 or 3 weeks of gold mining instead of the 1 week they obtained from that pit. Therefore, Tyson's conclusion that the cut is entirely mined out is problematic. Parker says this in a weary voice as he squints at the road ahead, trying to figure out what to do next to fix this desolate stretch of land. Clutching his wrist in a state of unconscious worry, he claims they soared through the incision. The next time he speaks, it's to tell everyone that he's back to having no money coming in, which is terrible. After he says this, he nervously scratches his arm while keeping his eyes on the road ahead. Parker has depleted his savings on Dominion Creek to the point where he can hardly afford to live. In order to access the gold resources he says lie 40 feet below the surface, Parker must continue to dig deeply into the ground, which is costing him more and more money by the day.
Talking about the new plant.
We've been trying to come up with a good name for Lucifer's twin there. So we were thinking, like, do you just give it a person's name?
Unfortunately, they had planned to spend a few weeks finishing up the Unforgiven cut before moving on to a new place. But now they're stuck with nothing, and the season is passing by without any other cuts to run. Everything they've worked for in the mining industry would be destroyed if they went bankrupt and had to start over from scratch after losing millions of dollars. Parker Schnabel has never been so perilously close to ruin before. Chris Dumit, sporting a weathered hat and a vibrant blue shirt, shows in and announces that they will begin clearing everything away in order to check for gold. Let us meet Lucifer. A smaller and more efficient wash plant than Parker's prior ownership of Big Red, the Lucifer was built by the Parker crew. Pulling the gold-catching mats from Lucifer and rinsing them off with a powerful hose is the first step in Chris's gold-finding method. He carefully lifts and flips the mats to ensure that every portion gets cleaned down. Tyson rushes up to Chris as he delicately washes down the Lucifer and inquires about Parker's mental state following this setback with the wash plant. Chris, who is continuing hosing down another part of the machine, responds by saying that Parker is clearly younger than him and that the child is under a lot of pressure. Parker Schnabel is barely 16 years old, and Chris Dumit is around 69. The Parker crew takes extra precautions to protect him because of his age gap compared to other groups of miners. Despite the fact that they are still relatively young in comparison to the other people on the show, their leader possesses a prodigious skill in their society. While standing next to one another on top of the Lucifer, Chris and Tyson continue their chat regarding Parker. Chris continues by shaking his head and simply restating that Parker is experiencing a great deal of mental stress. Additionally, after a lengthy pause, he adds that the child, Parker, has never had debt like this before. This causes Tyson to let out a startled laugh and make a remark that the majority of people would never have debt like Parker has right now. Since a result of the high cost of operations and the minimal returns that Parker has been seeing in the 2 months that he has been working on Dominion Creek, Chris does not contradict Tyson's darkly funny comment. This is a very true statement, since Parker is currently in debt to the tune of millions of dollars. As an alternative, he substantiates it by providing his own information, stating that during the springtime, it is common knowledge that they spend almost $1 million in a single week. After that, he poses a question to Tyson that is intended to be rhetorical. How much money have we brought in so far? The only reaction that can be given to that is silence, as both of them, along with the audience, are aware of the fact that the Parker crew has not brought in sufficient funds to cover their expenses by any stretch of the imagination. Then, Chris explains that things need to change because those obligations will be called in sooner or later, and they need to be prepared to fulfill those debts with gold. Chris states then that things need to change. According to Chris, they have a lot of bills that need to be paid, and the repercussions of not paying them will ensure that they lose all of the money and time that they have invested, in addition to everything that they have gained up to this point.
30 ounces, right on the dot. The grand total out of that cut was 408.95 ounces.
That ain't good.
Chris has a great deal of compassion for Parker's predicament, and Tyson, in a fairly subdued manner, contemplates everything that is causing Parker to experience such intense mental strain, in response to which he simply responds with a monosyllabic yes. While this is going on, a significant amount of money has been spent on the development of Dominion Creek. At the same time, a cleanup crew consisting of young men is working under a cloudy and gray sky to spray down every inch of slucifer.
And we could, do it for a bit. All right.
With the intention of alleviating the tension and melancholy that Chris's analysis has brought upon them both, Tyson begins his address by expressing his gratitude to the audience for watching. One day, I hope to be able to sluice a cut that is fully thawed, a slight homage to the motivational speech delivered by Martin Luther King Jr., as well as an acknowledgement of the fairly chilly and unpleasant conditions that they work under in order to sluice in the Yukon region of Alaska, which is known for its extreme cold. Chris laughs at this idea and says that he has dreams about being on a beach in the Bahamas. However, if Tyson wants to reach thawed ground, he needs to improve his expectations. Chris's dream is about being on a beach in the Bahamas. What this brief conversation reveals about their life stages is rather interesting. Although Tyson's small joke appears insincere at first glance, it alludes to the fact that, although he is older than Parker, he is significantly younger than Chris, his co-worker. Tyson Lee is still hoping for great things in his mining career, even though he is only 32 years old. Chris, who is both wiser and older, fantasizes of finally unwinding after a lifetime of hard work. They appear to get along famously, despite, or perhaps because of, the fact that they have vastly diverse life goals and aspirations. Chris calmly keeps rinsing the slucifer as Tyson departs. Parker is making his way up the hill, 10 miles from the motionless slucifer, to see Mitch Blaschka, a foreman in a dark suit who is diligently stripping the first cut at Dominion Creek, or the money pit. Seeing Parker approaching from the left, Mitch stops his machine and waits for him to approach his side. Mitch gives an optimistic response when Parker asks how his levels are doing, stating that they are not too awful. Parker doesn't spend any time. Mitch appears anxious and insecure as Parker presses him for an answer on his feelings towards the depths he is cutting to in that ditch. When Mitch responds to Parker's very simple inquiries, he uses filler phrases like "I mean," and his tone is erratic. His body language, including his lips curled into a narrow line and his apparent avoidance of eye contact, suggests that he is nervous. Before he speaks, Mitch even massages his lips with his hand. A multitude of things can be indicated by all of these small tics. For instance, Mitch may be concerned about his job security due to his knowledge of the crew's setbacks. Perhaps Mitch feels uncomfortable being the center of attention and is hence camera shy. The camera pans to Parker, who appears to have noticed Mitch's actions. He narrows his eyes and stares at Mitch intently before looking off into the distance toward the hills. Parker then states that he has an idea that Mitch should think about. Mitch casually says, "Let's hear it," and Parker points out that the ditch Mitch has been working in appears to be rather dry and may be ready to be sluiced. Mitch nods his head in agreement and proceeds to trail behind Parker as he confidently steps into the broad ditch they had created to sluice for gold. Mitch refrains from rejecting this out-of-the-ordinary proposal because he sees it as a desperate attempt to obtain much-needed funds. In order to be able to sluice pay dirt, Parker's crew had been diligently working for the past 6 weeks to strip 24 acres of the money pit. This was done in order to acquire the ability to sluice pay dirt. Following the excavation of the money pit, they discovered that the pay had been frozen.
You know, they're going to start calling in those debts, and we got to get some gold to fulfill those debts. If we don't pay the bills, we lose what we've got and what we got invested into it. So that's kind of riding on his mind, too.
It was necessary for them to devise a strategy in order to extract the gold from this region because the land is so freezing and abrasive. Their resourceful thinking resulted in the creation of the plan that is explained below. They would go around the edge of the cut and dig ditches for the meltwater that would drain into them from the pay gravels that were thawing on the ground. Despite the fact that the majority of the cut is still frozen, there is a little amount of pay dirt that has thawed deep within the ditches that have just been dug, and it is ready to be sluiced over. With a hand on his chin and a concerned expression on his face, Mitch gives off the impression of being reluctant.
Ground that Parker bought, and what's really in it?
When he inquires about the plant that he was considering utilizing for this concept, Parker responds in a somewhat hazy manner by stating that it is the one that is currently present. Mitch is, of course, inquiring about the wash plant that they would be utilizing for Parker's idea, which is quite ingenious. The son of the Slucifer is Mitch's quick response to Parker's hazy response, which he gives without hesitation. When Mitch refers to the pretty complex piece of machinery, which is formally named as the Macon SD600, Parker snickers at the moniker Mitch uses to refer to it. Mitch's defense of his silly term for the wash plant is that they need to name it. This would make it easier for everyone to understand what wash plant they are talking to in conversations going forward, which is Mitch's argument. While this debate is taking place, Parker is already making his way toward the son of the Slucifer. He walks with self-assurance across the mountains of dirt ditches that surround the frozen cut. At the same time as Mitch is extending his stride in order to catch up to Parker, who has long legs, he appears to stumble and leave a massive cloud of dirt behind him. When Parker purchased Dominion Creek for $15 million, he included a wash plant that was virtually brand new and was given the moniker Son of the Slucifer. This wash plant was included in the transfer of ownership. As they get closer to the washing plant, Parker tells them that all that needs to be done to that plant where it is located is to hook up the water line and throw the suction into the stream. He also suggests that they could do this for a while. These directions, which are quite ambiguous and disconnected, make great sense to Mitch, as evidenced by the fact that he responds with a straightforward, "All right, sounds good." Mitch Blaschka addresses the camera as he explains the thing that he is about to perform in the next moment.
What plant are you thinking?
That one that's here, probably.
Old son of the Slucifer there.
In this particular segment, Mitch's personality truly shines through as he explains all of Parker's objectives and directions as a collective decision-making process. He has a mindset that is extremely conducive to working with others, and he does not appear to be as anxious as he was earlier in the day. Taking this into consideration, it is possible that the lack of money coming in was a genuine issue for him, just as it was for the rest of the squad prior to that point in time. Since Parker has put a plan into place to handle the lack of money flowing into the company, the stress and worry that have been plaguing the organization have been significantly lifted. While the video of the many machines that are being utilized for this operation flashes across the screen in increasingly chaotic stages of the work that is being done in the ditches, you can hear intense music playing in the background.
And he's got a great attitude.
We make the transition into Mitch while he is operating an excavator as the son of the Slucifer shines brightly in the sunshine. Working diligently in his excavator, Mitch informs everyone that today is a special day since they are finally transferring money to the wash facility. To get Emma to come get some of the pay dirt he dug up, he pulls out his walkie-talkie. In her response, Emma Koch mentions that she is en route to collect payment. In the following scene, Mitch loads his scoop of pay dirt into Emma's truck bed as the yellow industrial vehicle, which bears the Volvo trademark, comes to a stop behind his excavator. The camera captures Emma's clumsy movements as she navigates the uneven and lumpy terrain. Since this is the first time any soil has ever been sent to a wash facility in Dominion, Mitch is understandably ecstatic as soon as he loads up Emma's truck. What the squad has been planning for weeks, their final objective, has come to fruition. The scoop will reveal the status of the ground they have been cultivating for months, so this is a pivotal moment. The moment of truth has arrived after this parcel was purchased for $15 million. Has their preparation been for a huge windfall or a disaster? Depending on the response, Parker's current life could be either saved or destroyed. The scoop of dirt that Emma is transporting to the washing facility will decide the life-altering gamble he is about to undertake. As Parker activates the Slucifer's son, the camera records his precise motions as he manipulates the controls. A blazing red warning sign alerts users to the high voltage, conveniently located next to the different dials. He appears to carefully consider all of the options before making a selection, as if he is pondering the impending fate of his largest buy to date. After being inactive for some time, the machine starts to pump, agitating any loose debris, such as leaves or pebbles, that may have settled onto it. As he cranks a large white wheel that is standing on the exterior of the machine, the sound of the water pouring through the wash plant gets so loud that it is almost impossible to hear. The machine is quivering and shaking as a result of the force of its power, and the camera focuses on the violent rushing of dark brown water splashing against it. After Parker has initiated the operation of his recently acquired wash plant, he makes the decision that it is time to incorporate some dirt into it and put its usefulness to the test. From the ditches of the frozen money pit, the newly dug pay dirt was taken right from the location. The significance of this event is underscored by the fact that Parker has gone to great lengths to be the one to operate the excavator that will be responsible for feeding the pay dirt into the new wash facility. In most cases, he is not able to perform such mundane activities on his own, since he is too high up in the hierarchy and engaged with other things.
We've tried to make it work with hydraulic riffles before, but it's just always been
problematic.
Another thing to go wrong, you know?
This is not your typical pay dirt. Rather, it is his opportunity to release himself from the $18 million debt that he has been squandering during the entire season at this point. In Dominion Stream, Parker is at long last on the verge of making a profit. As Parker sits in his excavator, he is having a conversation with himself, telling himself that he is hoping there is a lot of gold in it. This is a pretty intriguing remark that he made to himself. It could be his interpretation of the term manifestation, mainly due to the fact that the parlor does not have any direct influence over the outcome of this gamble. The only thing he can do at this point is hope that this pay dirt will demonstrate to everyone that there is a wealth of gold waiting for them in their money pit. As we pull back, the music starts to build up to a crescendo, and we see the son of Lucifer at work, which appears to be small but powerful in the middle of the hills of dug dirt. This particular week, Parker's group holds 2 gold weighings in their possession. This indicates that we will soon learn how much gold was discovered in the ditches of the money pit and how much the firm is going to benefit from all of the work that was done after all of this misery in the middle of the Yukon. The Unforgiven Cut, which had stopped generating gold 2 weeks before their best projections, will be the source of the 2 distinct weighings that would be performed.
5,
6,
10.
In addition, the Dominion Brook itself was the source of the very first gold that was discovered. However, it is possible that a more correct statement would be to suggest that it sprang from the ditches of the Dominique Creek. This is a desperate move made by a group of gold miners that are desperate. Chris is seated on a dust blue lawn chair while Tyson enters their base of operations for the purpose of weighing their gold. Chris is observing these events. The only thing Chris says to begin their conversation is a remark about the awful noise that Tyson Lee's door makes when he opens and closes it. He does not provide any kind of greeting. It is quite possible that the noise is the result of any damage that the truck may have received while being driven across the harsh, cold, and merciless landscape of Alaska. Chris offers this joke with a laugh, and Tyson responds with his own sense of humor by coming to sit down in a chair directly next to Chris. Chris may have the impression that this comment is insulting. Everyone has been waiting for this moment, and now it has here. A small amount of gold was extracted from the ditches of Dominion Creek, the last of which came from the Unforgiven Cut. Mitch stoops to the edge of a table and plops down at the meeting. As he starts his salutations, Mitch mentions the new wash facility and how they extracted gold from it. After Chris and Tyson give their approval, Mitch suggests they rebrand it. Funny Mitch? He couldn't help but want to name things so they can all agree on what they are and how they might be utilized later. Nevertheless, not a single person suggests a name, as Parker shows up just moments after. Despite the event's significance to their continued prosperity and activities in Alaska, the casual attire of the attendees belies its gravity. Wearing nothing more fancy than a white shirt and blue trousers, even Parker, who has spent the majority of his working life in an office coordinating everything, looks dapper.
Hold up to its name?
I think we ran 100 hours. On the Indian River, if we ran 100 hours of ditching, we'd get, what, 50 ounces, if that?
But there is a notable fashion difference. Parker's suit is immaculate. All three of the men's shoes have turned a brownish hue from the continual stepping on of freshly dug dirt, and their pants are covered in filth and dust. Tyson brings Parker up to speed on the group's discussion, explaining that we were all chatting about the new plant as he sits facing the other participants. Right after that, Mitch mentions that they were attempting to rename Sluicifer's twin. Since no one had mentioned the idea of a name for the new wash plant before to Parker's arrival, except Mitch, this is, of course, a slight reworking of their previous talk. Tyson, however, remains silent as he casually lights his cigarette and reclines in his law chair. In keeping with his biased decision to give a name to an inanimate wash plant, Mitch asks, "Should we just give it a person's name?" "Dumit and I came up with Bob," Mitch continues, looking to his left. Throughout, Chris Dumit simply smiles indulgently at Mitch and says nothing. Parker leans back in his chair, his arms resting on his head, and says, "I like Bob." He continues by saying that he hasn't been overly concerned about giving the wash plant a name because he thought they would sell it. The crew is taken aback by the idea of selling the new wash plant, but Parker explains his argument before anybody else has a chance to disagree. According to Parker, they had every intention of selling off some of the goods they had acquired from Dominion's Creek in order to recover part of the purchase price, but they had failed to do so. He continues with an increasingly impassioned and emphatic presentation, informing everyone that the plan is truly worth about $1 million. Chris asks in a tone that begs the question, "Really?" in response to Parker's claim that the item is worth $1 million in its present condition. "I appreciate you tuning in." Parker gives a rundown of the details, saying that the wash plant, which remains nameless, has 1,000 hours on it and is currently worth $1 million. That is practically novel in their industry. In light of Parker's extensive information about the rumored worth of the so-called son of the Sluicifer, Chris offers a cheery, "Sell it."
Because I think we might sell it. Part of the whole idea of buying this place was we'd be able to recoup some of the...
To which Parker responds with a tone that combines frustration and sarcasm. "That's what I'm saying." "Excuse me, I just said that." With a good idea thrown in by Mitch, Chris, the whole group laughs. Chris suddenly realizes he's been behaving as if he came up with the idea to sell the wash plant. He pulls a face and makes the universal sign for acting a bit insane. The unspoken gravity of their impending action is probably to blame for Chris's sluggishness. Despite everything, the camaraderie is palpable whenever there's a moment to sit and talk. Stressful computations are ongoing to determine if the Dominion ditches contain enough gold to assist them escape their current predicament. After a week of exhausting mining, last-ditch attempts, and dried-up cuts, they finally get to relax and enjoy each other's company. Putting all of that aside, I appreciate it. "Tyson, you ground this unforgiven cut extremely fast," Chris remarks as he stands up after their carefree laughter. Tyson admits as much, claiming to be aware that his subordinates and he surprised everyone with how fast they were able to steal the gold from the unforgiven cut. Chris gives a dramatic performance, as if to say, "I want to see how we did." He knows that everyone has been waiting for the big reveal, wondering whether they would make it or if they should just give up and go home. Chris reveals what appears to be a sticker-covered thermos cup that is actually made of steel on the inside. The container's size provides hints as to the possible amount of gold within. The unforgiven cut was mined out weeks ahead of schedule, so things are not looking good for Parker and his targeted amount of 50 ounces of gold.
First gold from Dominion there.
Yeah.
That's not bad for the time that the plant had the issues with the water.
Yeah.
The penultimate dig at the unforgiven cut yielded 120 ounces, which would be required to hit the target. The 30 Oz are valued about $60,000. Parker flinches at the announcement of 30 ounces, lets out a painful breath, and flicks the unforgiven cut out of his mouth. The unforgiven cut yields a total of 408.95 ounces of gold. As he rubs his eyes with both hands, apparently trying to relieve some of the pressure building up behind them, Parker can only declare that it ain't good, his mind racing at the horrific voices he is hearing. As the camera moves to Tyson, he appears to be staring blankly ahead. He remains silent despite the dismal expression on his face. After Chris decides to start talking about the Dominion Creek cut and the gold collected there, Mitch looks at Parker with alarm. Starting with the opening of the refrigerator door that houses all of the gold they were able to mine in the previous week, Chris announces that they have finally started mining Dominion gold. "How were those ditches?" Tyson inquires. He is curious as to whether or not the money pit lived up to its moniker. Parker claims they spent 100 hours operating over the money pit's ditches. He goes on to state that the Indian River would yield at most 50 ounces from the same amount of ditching time. Parker draws this comparison to paint a picture of how anything above the 50 ounces of gold they would have received at home would be considered an improvement. The next step is for Dominion Creek to finish mining for those 50 ounces. The Parker Group was able to routinely harvest from the Indian River following 100 hours of hard mining. As Chris starts to pour a flow of gold into the scale, tension in the air grows. He yells out the numbers 10, 20, 40, and 60 for each large weight that passes past. Everyone can now enjoy a moderate celebration. They have multiplied their usual gold haul from the Indian River by a factor of 2. This provides hope that their entire quest has not been a disastrous error, as they have been worried about for the last 2 months. It indicates that the Dominion Creek ditches have been more lucrative than their previous haunt. Chris is still counting the gold that has been collected from the ditches. He has not yet finished weighing it. He starts at 60 and quickly moves on to 90, 110, 120, and 130. Finally, he taps the thermos one last time to remove any last gold particles, and the scale reads 132.45 ounces. To say that this last-ditch effort was successful would be a major understatement. More than $250,000 is the sum total from the ditches. Parker offers a slightly ambivalent response, saying, "It's a lot better than I thought it would be." Mitch, on the other hand, is beaming broadly and remarking that it's not terrible for the trenches of the real money pit. Although his reaction is monotone, it doesn't diminish the enthusiasm of the others. They keep saying that considering the amount of time the plant had to dig and all the problems with the water, it's not a bad haul. On ditch dirt, Chris claims they've got some of the best, and he starts planning how to extract value from the actual pay dirt. Parker, relieved that his last-ditch effort to inject some cash into their business had been successful, politely declines and says his goodbyes. As the Parker crew says their goodbyes and heads out the door, Parker declares that getting 1.3 ounces of gold in an hour is actually pretty good, and that in principle, the remaining money pit should be flushed with even more gold than that. Concerned about squandering $200,000, Parker appears to wish to control his level of enthusiasm or optimism. It is his firm belief that $200,000 must not be frittered away. In his words, he refuses to allow 200,000 lofty aspirations dampen their good fortune. Just 2 months after setting out on the long, arduous road to recover the funds he invested in this undeveloped claim, Parker Schnabel's astounding ditch-sluicing gambit has paid off. The squad is succeeding after suffering a devastating and horrifyingly dry, unforgiven cut, thanks to the $250,000 they earned from ditches. When the remainder of the money pit is prepared to go, they will begin to fantasize about the kinds of gold they may strike. Their debt has ballooned from the $15 million bet Parker made at the beginning of the season to $18 million. But by the 8th episode, things appear to be back on track. The once impossible goal of departing with $160 million is now within reach. The Gold Rush team finally discovers something that nobody is talking about yet, and it's the biggest one so far. It has sparked immense interest among gold and mystery treasure enthusiasts alike. Want to know what it is? Click on the next video now.